Well, hello, I am Larry Moshell. I'm the Director of Staff Development for Artist and Christian Testimony International, and here just to kind of talk a little bit about funding your ministry. And really look forward to helping you guys think through funding strategies and even talking a bit to the participants here, just kind of figuring out next steps and calling for ministry. So we'll try to cover some of these things. Obviously, this is not a full-blown workshop where we'll be able to work in depth in a lot of those areas, but really just wanted to introduce to you or explore some things to keep in mind as you are considering whether a nonprofit structure is even helpful to you or something that's going to help you move forward with your ministry. So look forward to doing that. And for those of you, just to let you know, I will be happy to send you these slides if you'd like that. You'll obviously get a copy of this recording in your as a participant, so you've got that. But anything we talk about, just follow up with me, and I'm happy to assist you with those things. So as I mentioned, my name is Larry Moshell. I'm often called Coach Mo. I'll kind of tell you why that fits here in a bit. But I'm the director, international director of staff development for Artists and Christian Testimony International. I've been with ACT now for about 16 years, a little over 16 years actually. And so ACT is a ministry missions organization. We have over 400 artistic and innovative ministry departments, actually about 600 staff members that are manning and doing missionaries, ministers, doing their departments around the world. And so it's really my privilege of being able to come along and try to help guide and direct and assist them as they help move forward. I have a Master of Divinity in Concentration and Counseling, so that's kind of my training because I always wanted to be about helping people discover and pursue their calling. That's really been kind of my mission. But my gifts, my spiritual gifts and just natural God-given gifts and abilities and lots of experiences in organization and administration. I've helped start a couple of different schools and directed the schools and helped start a nonprofit structure and kind of move and grow a music ministry. I did that for almost 15 years, a little longer than 15 years, I guess. And was an executive pastor. So a lot of organization structure, again, kind of helping individuals or organizations pursue the things that the Lord is calling them to. So that's my real passion. That's what I love to do more than anything else. Now, I played soccer all the way through college, and I coached soccer for 11 years. So that's where the Coach Mo came from. Coach Moshell got abbreviated to Coach Mo, but it stuck because I'm still coaching, just not coaching people how to put the ball, players to put the ball in the back of the net, but coaching to accomplish goals, the ministry goals, or whatever personal life calling and goals and things there. So the thing I love to do more than anything else is just helping creative visionaries, whether that is artists, which has been my privilege these last few years with Artists and Christian Testimony, or students. I work a lot with high school and college students and have done workshops and seminars for them, trying to help them to discover who it is God's called them to be and move forward. So that's my background, and where I've got some ability to be able to speak about the things that we're talking about, and hopefully can encourage you in these areas. I love this quote. I ran across this quote a couple of years ago out of a book I was reading on help coaching and calling and things like this, and especially in light of our staff and missionaries here with Artists and Christian Testimony. The power of a river is in its banks. If you take away its banks, it spreads out and becomes a lazy lake. That's the quote. I add, or a stagnant pond, if it just sits there and no movement or nothing's happened. But if you keep the banks firm, give the thing form, there's a lot of power behind it. When I came on board with ACT, again, as I said, my gifts are in administration and organization. I mean, I just naturally, here I am at point A and I need to get point Z. and I can just see that and I can lay that. It's just the way I think. That's just kind of the natural way I function. That's not always the case with creatives in that linear, logical kind of way. And so I had to kind of learn, because there's a lot of times I would want to say, hey, if you just let me tell you how to do it, I could maybe get you there a whole lot faster. But that didn't work because, again, it's not my role because it's your vision, it's your assignment, but I am called to come alongside. And so I know when I spoke to a lot when I was with ACT folks and these artistic and creative, innovative individuals, that sometimes they were very adverse to too much structure. They felt like they were being boxed in. I need to have room for spontaneity and creativity, and I don't want too much, outlines and structures and deadlines and tasks and all of that kind of stuff. And so, but we also realize, illustrated by this, without some type of structure, I mean, there's no movement. You don't know where to go. And I find that a lot of our ACT folks do get paralyzed. So many things they want to do, and so many desires, and so many passions, and so many ideas, and things like that. But what's the next? How do I move forward? Next step, and how do I accomplish these things? So I think this is what we're trying to do. What I'm encouraging you to do is create enough structure to kind of give you some direction. But the good thing about banks is they're gonna evolve, they're gonna change, they're moldable. Banks are. It's not this concrete kind of a barrier that's keeping you boxed in a particular way. So I just think that's a great illustration, a great goal as we're moving forward. And so hopefully I can help you today to begin considering maybe some ways of firming up those banks to help you, give you some direction. And these are I like these 4 Ds. I've been using these kind of as I've been coaching and training and helping our staff: delight, discover, define, and develop. And I don't want to spend a lot of time, because that's not the purpose of this workshop, to talk about structure so much, but it's almost impossible to talk about funding your ministry without at least looking at structure. How do you put those banks in place and build that? And I think these 4 Ds give us an outline to kind of consider that. So let me suggest, and then maybe we can open it up for some questions or comments if you've got them are related to this, because we do need to have some kind of structure as we move forward. So delight, discover, define, develop. These are 6 areas that I feel like are pretty essential as you are building a ministry, considering putting some things in place. So the first thing is delight in who God created you to be. That's where it's got to start. Not figuring out, and this is where calling gets mixed up so often in our teachings. The primary essence of calling in the scripture is God calling us to himself. That's the first place and that's the primary aspect of calling, is God is calling us to himself. But then the second aspect of calling is God is calling us to be who he's created us to be. He's created us with unique gifts, unique passions, unique experiences. And so we need to delight in who he created us to be. And as I am being who he created me to be, then he is going to start opening up opportunities for me to do the things that he's created me to do. So it's reversed. Sometimes when we talk about calling, we talk about, God's called me to do this thing. Yes, there are particular assignments, but they are always in line with who he's created me to be. So even when I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I can try to lean into, well, who has he called me to be? And how can I be who he's called me to be in this moment, in this opportunity, in this place? All of you have shared a little bit before we got started, the creative gifts that the Lord's given you. How can you use those gifts in the ways he's called you? And then we need to kind of define that. And that's where discovering that particular assignment in this day, in this time, in this place, in my season of life. Do I have young children? That's going to form your season of life. Am I retired? and I don't have a steady 9 to 5 jobs. I've got a little more freedom. That's a season of life. There's a lot of different things that we need to pay attention to. And in this season of life, in this place, in my journey, what assignment has the Lord given me? And that's where we need to define that with that mission statement. And that mission statement is crucial because that's going to keep us focused. That's our target. This is what I believe the Lord has assigned me to accomplish this. So how do I move forward with that? So that's why the mission statement is so crucial. And that is formed out of as we are delighting in who he created me to be. And then the mission statement leads us into defining. So delight, discover, and define how are we going to achieve that assignment. So that's where the plan comes in. That's how, if this is what the Lord's calling me to do, based on who he's created me to be, now how am I going to do that? I'm at point A. Point Z is achieving this assignment. We probably will never achieve that assignment fully before the Lord returns or we go to be with the Lord, but at least pursuing towards that target. What's the next step and the next step and the next step? So again, we don't have time to talk about these three things, but we cannot talk about funding really until you have got a sense of who he's created you to be, what assignment he's giving you to do, and how I'm going to move forward, because your funding is based on what's it going to cost me to be able to accomplish that plan. So we'll open it up for a couple of comments or questions here in a minute, but let me mention these next things. So we've delighted, we've discovered, and we've defined. So now we need to develop. And there's really three ways to kind of develop ways to pursue your assignment. I've defined how I'm going to do it. Now what are the ways I'm going to accomplish it? Well, one of the things is that we really preach here at ACT International is that it's too big for you to do by yourself. So you've got to have a team. You've got to have people supporting you and encouraging you, helping you make decisions, stepping in and rolling up their sleeves and assisting you. If it's truly an assignment from the Lord, I can almost promise you that it's too big for you to do by yourself. So that's a crucial way that you must develop to help you to accomplish this, is develop a team around you. Maybe not a doing team, but a team to help you to bear some of the pressure of making the decisions and praying through and holding you accountable to staying true to the things the Lord's called you to do. Excuse me. You also need to develop ways of of organization and administration, keeping files, keeping records, creating manuals, whatever. What do I need to do if I need to schedule, scheduling or managing my books and all of that. And we need organization and administration really for two reasons. The first one is for integrity. Without organization and administration, it's hard to maintain integrity. How can you demonstrate or prove that you are accomplishing what you said you were going to accomplish? How can you demonstrate and prove that you are using and stewarding the funds that have been provided you in a legal and right and proper, not only legal and right, but also stewarding them in the best way to be able to accomplish? How can you do that and demonstrate that to those people that are going to sponsor you and support you and partner with you? So organization. And then the second reason we need organization and administration is for longevity. Because if you don't have some kind of records or files or little manuals of how you did this time, then you're reinventing the wheel every single time. Plus, it's all right here in your head. So how in the world are you going to have a team to help you? If they don't know what to do, it's all right here, and you don't have some way that you could say, hey, here, take these next steps and you do this and you do this. And that's the real reason we need an organization administration, to be able to pass it on to others. Because again, if this is an assignment from the Lord, it's bigger than you. And hopefully it's going to go on beyond you. But that's not going to happen if there's not some kind of records and files and organization administration. So again, creatives sometimes don't like to think about that organization administration piece, but it is crucial for you to maintain integrity and for this to go on and grow even beyond you, or at least beyond you in a way of other people being involved, but maybe so even beyond you when you go to be with the Lord, who's going to carry this on. And then the last thing is funding. That's what, obviously, to do all these things, you got to have funds. And that's what we're going to spend the most of our workshop talking about here. But look at where this is in this list. And all of these things are going to kind of be happening simultaneously, but there really is a reality to, there is a logical kind of process here that you are probably not going to get all of the funding you really need to be able to do all the Lord's calling you to do until you've got these other things at least developing and somewhat in place. And that makes sense. I'm sure you can see that. If you don't have these things somewhat in place, some of the questions even that you're asking, you're not real sure about this. That's why funding's so hard. So yeah, we can talk about funding, and we will, but these other things are pretty crucial. Any comments or questions about this before we move from this? That's all I had planned on spending much time on, but happy to address any specific questions, or if you've got a comment about any of this. Anything?
I was wondering if when you said the mission statement, did you mean like a smaller, more specific mission statement, or did you mean more like a large scale life mission?
Well, I mean, both. And yeah, I mean, as one hand, we all, as a Christian, as believers, we all have one mission statement. That's to share Christ and disciple others. So that's our kind of our universal, already the assignment given by the Lord. But then there are specific assignments given to us. How do we play that out? And Covey, forget his first name, was real popular a few years ago. He was the guru on life planning and life mission statements and stuff like that. So I do think, yeah, there are lifelong kind of goals in line with who we are, that these are the kind of things that we're going to see patterns. But one of the things that I have found helpful with our creative staff is really try to focus in on a mission statement that defines your assignment in this season. I think there's different seasons to our mission statement, different times in our life, different times in our ministry, different opportunities where we are right that moment. And so this is the long-term kind of mission statement, but right now, what does that look like in the next, year or 2 years or 5 years? And so you might have a mission statement that's a little more focused. So I'm one that you really want to, I think it's so important to have a good mission statement to give you some direction and focus. And then also to be able to communicate to others so they can decide if they want to be a part of your team or support you. That mission statement can evolve a little bit based on kind of where you are. So that's my thought. Any other comments or questions, follow up to that? Does that make sense?
Thanks, that was helpful.
Yeah, good. All right, so based on this structure, let's kind of focus in the rest of this time on this funding piece. And one of the questions to really address is the differences between these three words, because we have found, especially here in Nashville, Tennessee, where our home office is, these words get confusing. That there are things that they call here in Nashville, Music City, and there's a lot of Christian music come out of Nashville. There's a lot of things that's called ministry, when in fact it's really business. And that's not a bad thing. It's just we need to be clear about the differences between the three before we can start figuring out how they fit together to help us to move forward with our ministry, if we are indeed called to do this full time and we need to fund it. So let me just talk real briefly. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important enough just to clarify, because I think it does bring some clarity and some help in these areas. So business. First and foremost, and very simply, is selling stuff. Business is selling products, selling services. If you're a musician, and you get paid an honorarium or even a love offering. Some of our staff say, well, I'm not really functioning like a business because I'll go for a love offering. And then my first question to them is, if that church does not take up a love offering, would you still go? And they say, well, no, there's no way I can go because I can't afford to go if they don't take up a love offering. Well, then you're still functioning on a business paradigm. You pay and I play, or I provide this service for a fee or for a gift. So it might be a faith-based business paradigm. You don't have a set fee, but if you are still basing your revenue on providing some type of service or product and expecting some kind of revenue generated from that, that is a business paradigm. So that's, again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's lots of ministry that functions on a business paradigm. I point to a lot of our most popular Christian music artists. I think back to Amy Grant and Stephen Curtis Chapman, and some that have been very successful in the Christian music industry. That was a business. They ran their ministry as a business, and that was a good thing. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind with business, just in general. We won't have time to talk about this, but the goodness criteria as a Christian, we want to do it right. We want to do it morally. We want to do it fair. So there's a lot of scriptures that point us to principles, biblical principles, when we're running our business, that we want to do it based on those biblical criteria. And then the other big thing, the difference of business power versus kingdom power. Business power, it is clearly the power of business is money. Businesses do not function if you don't make money. So that's the power of money, of the business, is you've got to be making money. The power of kingdom power is faith, that we are in faith, believing and moving forward and trusting. And that doesn't always jive with business. That's where the conflict with business. The Lord is calling me to do this, and I am in faith moving forward with this, whether I get paid dime or not. Well, then that becomes a challenge if you are seeking to run your ministry as a business. So that's the first thing, business. Nothing wrong with that, nothing unbiblical. It is perfectly fine to run a ministry on business, but we need to be clear about that. The second term is occupation. And occupation is simply, how do I make my living? How do I pay my bills? I pay my bills. I have an occupation of working at Starbucks and get a paycheck. I cut grass. That's my occupation, maybe as a student. I have a desk job, or I am hoping to be occupational in my ministry, receive a paycheck from going out and doing my ministry, doing the gallery, or doing music, or whatever that is. So occupation, and two key words here I think that's helpful as you think about this is occupation versus vocation. We often use these terms synonymously when in fact they are not the same word. Even though, like we talk about vocational assessments, that's usually like a career assessment. What job do I fit based on my interest or my talents or my experience, things like that. But that's a misuse of the word, the original use of the word. Vocation originally meant, it comes from the Latin word vocation, vocare. I didn't study Latin, but I do know this comes from the word vocare, which means to hear something outside of myself calling to me. So vocation has more to do with, what is tugging at me, what's pulling at me, what's calling to me. What are my passions that lean me and pull me in that direction? What are my gifts and my experiences that just naturally call to me and lean me in that direction? So vocation is really very much in line with calling, that it's not about how I'm getting paid. It's about being who it is God's called me to be. So we can pursue our vocation of being who it is God's called me to be, being an artist, a musician, whatever passions and gifts the Lord's calling us. We can do that and may not ever become fully occupational in my vocation. And that's okay. If that's why it's okay to have a job at Starbucks so that I can have the money I need to pay my bills while I am pursuing my vocation of ministering to people in whatever way I'm ministering. So there's nothing lesser about not being fully occupational in my ministry. It's what we want to do first and foremost is pursue our vocation, our calling, and then determine, how do I pay my bills? How do I make a living? Now, the more we work at this, hopefully those are going to come together. That maybe the Lord does have for you a place to be full-time occupationally in your vocation, full-time occupationally pursuing your ministry. So that's a good one, though, to keep in mind, because we sometimes feel undervalidated. It's almost like, if I'm not getting paid for this, it's just a hobby. Well, that's not true. It could be a hobby, but if this is who you are, that's who you are, whether you get paid or not. And that, hopefully, that's affirming to you, but it also gives us direction on how to move forward. And then the last thing is ministry. First of all, ministry is a lifestyle. If we're Christians, everything we do, we minister to our families, we minister to our neighbors, we minister within our church. We're ministering. Ministry should be a lifestyle. But then what we're talking about here in the context of this workshop is that ministry is also creating some kind of structure or mission statement and plan to be able to serve God and others on God's behalf. We want to use our music not to become rich and famous, though the Lord may open up that opportunity for us to make lots of money and to have a platform. But we are using our music or our art or whatever the Lord has given us because we want to use that to serve God on and to serve others on God's behalf. That is what ministry is. So again, ministry can happen out of business. We would not have Christian radio if we did not have the Christian music business in Nashville. But that is business. That in and of itself is not ministry. Ministry takes place out of the business. So I hope this isn't. I haven't spent too much time on this, but we see people get this mixed up, and they get discouraged because they're not making enough money. And should I really pursue this? Well, that's a factor that definitely needs to be considered, but it's not the validation for whether you are called to do this or not. Any comments or questions on this before I move on? Hopefully I didn't spend too much time on this. Anything? All right, maybe something to and we spend a good bit of time in some of our training talking about this. Any of these things, we have additional training that we do, some passages to meditate on. So again, follow up with me if there's anything I can do to help you as you're kind of thinking through these things. All right, so let's get more specifically to the funding. That's what we'll cover the rest of this time together. The first question is, when do you potentially need a nonprofit? We get calls to our office in ACT. People say something to the effect in that, I want to start a ministry, so I need a nonprofit. It's as if they believe that because they are a ministry, they have to be a nonprofit. Well, that's not true, because I just stated that you can do ministry as a business. So nonprofit and for-profit, that's just your funding structure. That's not required, whether you're a business or not. I mean, whether you're a ministry or not. So when do you need a nonprofit? Well, the primary criteria is if you are pursuing things that cannot be fully funded in any other way. Now hear me. It's not because I'm not being funded in any other way. I'm no longer selling CDs and no longer, getting people, scheduling to come in and do concerts, or people aren't buying tickets to come to my gallery, or they're not paying to see my film, or whatever it is. That's not what I'm talking about. But if the Lord has given you an assignment that cannot be funded on a business model fully, then you need a nonprofit. Two examples. If the Lord is calling you to prison ministry, then do not do prison ministry on a business paradigm. You will go broke the first day because the prison will not pay you a dime to go to that prison, and you cannot sell any CDs at that prison. So if you are hoping to go to prison and do ministry and travel around and minister in prisons, then you have to have people that believe in you, that want to support you and fund you in a nonprofit way to be able to go do that. So that's a good example. Another example, the Red Cross. The Red Cross has to be a nonprofit. Otherwise, it would be Walgreens or CVS. They have to be a nonprofit so that people can give them gifts so that they can then give those gifts away, give medicine or give, aid to people in need. So both of those are examples of they could not function in a business paradigm, therefore they need to be a nonprofit. So that's the question you need to ask. For me to do what the Lord's calling me to do, can I do that fully funded in a business model? And if not, if there's no way of fully funding what you need, then you probably need to consider a nonprofit structure. Then the second thing is, do others want to support you? Because obviously a nonprofit is not going to be successful if people don't want to come along and support you. So you've got to be able to communicate this passion, this vision this assignment the Lord's given you in such a way that people say, wow, that needs to happen. I want to help. I want to get on board. I want to move forward with that. So questions, comments about this? Anything? We'll kind of elaborate on this a little bit more, but anything before I move on from here?
What might be some sub-questions to ask in order to determine whether your ministry can be funded, whether your ministry can be funded as a business or vice versa?
Okay, great question. If I don't answer that in this next little few slides we go to, let's come back to that, because I think that's where I am going to break down this, different ways, because really the reality here, let me show you this slide. Really, there's three funding options we've already talked about. There's the business paradigm, centering all funding strategy around selling performances and products. There is the nonprofit paradigm, which is inviting people to partner with you, to support you financially. But there is a third scenario. It doesn't have to be either or. And I think artistic ministries are uniquely positioned to have both paradigms at the same time. So it doesn't have to be an either or. And that's what we'll kind of talk about here. And that's a little bit to your question there. How do we define, should it be a business or should it be a nonprofit, or is there the possibility there's some mixture of those two? So let's look at this a little bit and then see if that doesn't answer some of your questions, your question, and raise some things, and then we can talk about that a little bit more. So let's talk about revenue streams. Now, one of the things that I highly recommend you, if you are considering moving into a nonprofit structure, is get used to using this word revenue for your nonprofit structure. Do not call the money that comes into your ministry, if it's a nonprofit, income, because nonprofits don't make income. Income is produced by businesses, selling product or whatever, so they make income. And then you make personal income through a paycheck. So you get paid a job and you get personal income. Nonprofits generate revenue to fund the activities of their ministry. So that's more technical language just for you to know. When you're talking about nonprofit, you should do that. But the other reason it's helpful is to separate the revenue into your ministry and the personal income that you might get, your occupation, if you are hoping to be occupational with your nonprofit. So revenue is going to come into your department. $100 it comes into as a donation. Well, that $100 is not your money. That $100 is a $100 donation of revenue to your ministry. Now, if you turn around and write you a paycheck from that $100 to yourself out of that revenue, then now that's personal income. So that really helps to kind of separate these things. If you're raising $100,000 this year in your ministry, and we have some of our ministries that raise $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 within ACT, that's not, they don't owe any taxes. That's usually one of the questions. Now, what's the tax liability on that? There's none, because that's not your money. Now, if you draw yourself a salary from that, then you now have personal income and you owe taxes only on that bit. So these next couple of slides, I just wanted to emphasize that or clarify that, because now I'm talking about what are ways you could potentially generate revenue for your ministry department. Now, two ways here, which are very common, are ministry events and ministry resources. So if you're doing, a concert, we've talked about that a lot. That's a good example. If you're out doing a concert or leading worship somewhere or going to a pub and doing that, and you get paid an honorarium, or if you're leading worship in a church and they take up a love offering, or if you're doing a workshop and you charge a fee, or if you're a counselor and you're charging fees for counseling, all of those are revenue, potentially revenue for your ministry. And it is okay for nonprofits to sell stuff. So nonprofits can have set fees and they can sell stuff and they can charge for their activities. So all of that would be revenue from ministry events. But then there's also product. You sell a book, or you give away a book and ask for donations for that book, or you have a film and you're charging tickets, or a drama and you're charging tickets, or take up a love offering. Well, that's going back to the event. So you're selling a CD, or you're selling a book, or you're selling products, paintings that you're creating. That's all revenue generated from the product or the resources that you're creating. Now, if these are your only two pieces, these are your only two revenue streams, then you probably don't need a nonprofit, right? I mean, you're selling stuff. Now, if you're doing it all as a love offering, you're asking gifts, maybe that would be the case. You would want a nonprofit so that you can receive it as a gift rather than charging it as a sale. But in most cases, if this is the only two revenue streams, I mean, Lou, we were talking about Lou as a musician. I mean, this has been your two revenue streams up to this point. You had fees that you charged and you sold CDs. And so you haven't really needed a nonprofit up to this point. Now you're considering, what are some other revenue streams that I could bring in to allow me to continue moving forward? So that's two. Now, two other areas that now you might want to introduce is the donation piece. And I divided into these two different pieces, and the size of the pieces are just examples. So there's no relevance to the size of the pieces here. Hopefully these two pieces get much bigger than anything else, but like I said, it's just illustration. Now the green pie, the one-time gifts, that's like grants or fundraisers, or a church, a business wants to give you a check as a sponsorship or something like that. So that's a one-time gift. And I separate that from the yellow piece, the financial partners, because they are two different strategies of funding, of fundraising. One-time gifts, there's a particular strategy, but financial partners, that's where you are going to individual families or maybe churches and say, hey, would you come along and believe in my ministry enough to support me on a monthly basis? Maybe $50 a month or $100 a month or $1,000 every quarter, whatever the case may be. So those are making more of a commitment than just giving you a one-time gift. They're saying, yeah, we want to walk with you, we want to partner with you and stay committed into helping you to accomplish this vision in this direction. So that's the donation piece. Now, obviously, if you are adding either one of these pieces, the yellow or the green, then this is when you need a nonprofit, because you are going to be asking people to come along and support you, to financially assist you, partner with you moving forward. That's why you need a nonprofit. And then the last little piece I add here is called related activities. And you have some flexibility here. So let's say, you're teaching painting lessons or keyboard lessons, or you're out. Yeah, let's just start with those two examples. Well, you could decide to say, well, I'm just going to teach those keyboard lessons and pocket that money and report that as personal income. That's perfectly fine. You are now doing that as a sole proprietor. Or you could say, I'm going to make that a part of my ministry. As I'm teaching keyboard lessons or painting lessons, I'm going to be praying for my students. Maybe if it's appropriate, I'm going to be praying with my students. Maybe have a little, Bible study or something with them. You could incorporate that, maybe or maybe not. But you could then, instead of making that personal income, you could run that as revenue into your department. So you're just kind of expanding your mission to include that is one of your strategies for accomplishing your mission, and it's now revenue. So there's some flexibility there. We'll talk about some more examples of this in a little bit. Does this pie make sense? Help break down anything? Any questions about this specifically that I could address before we move on? Is this helpful?
It's been very helpful.
All right, good. All right, so let's get down to the one thing here. The more pieces to the pie you have, the less dependent you become on each piece. I can tell you right now, obviously, COVID has had a tremendous impact on lots of people for a lot of different reasons. Well, now here we are, Artisan Christian Testimony, which is a missions organization, which is primarily dependent on support and gifts from others. So what impact has COVID had on us? Well, I can thank the Lord and tell you that ACT has had very little impact from COVID. Now, some of our ministries have been impacted greatly. Those ministries whose activities and revenue is primarily been dependent on this red piece and this blue piece, they've struggled. Their ministry funding has primarily been dependent on ministry events and product or resources because they haven't been able to do events. And if they're not doing events, they're probably not being able to sell or get donations for their product. Our ministries that have primarily been funded on this yellow piece, the financial partnerships, have seen very little drop off. So they have seen, because families have said, I am committed to partnering with you. Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit, but I know, hey, I'm partnering with you. If I cut back, you're going to struggle. And so let's walk through this together. Now, obviously, if they lost their job, we have seen some drop off, but not drastic by any means. We've actually grown since January, just by new ministries coming in and ministries still raising new funds and things like that. So that's a reason, if you've got more pieces, then it's not, if one piece kind of dries up for a while, you're not lost. You've got multiple streams of revenue coming in. That's why it's strategic to do that. All right, so benefits of partnership funding. Let me just kind of toot the horn, I guess you could say, try to convince you that this is the strategy. Melissa was sharing before we got started just some of the struggles that they've had trying to do this, and finding partnerships, inviting people to partner, and it is difficult. I'm not minimizing that, but I can tell you, like ACT International averages this past year, I think we were over $9 million of total revenue for 2019. $9 million of total revenue. The majority of that is $50 a month, $100 a month, $500 every quarter, or whatever. It's that ongoing partnership development. So I can tell you it can be done. Our top 10 ministries in 2019 all raised over $130,000, from 130 all the way up to just under $300,000 last year. Some of them, yeah, they got some big gifts, but again, majority of that was this monthly ongoing partnerships of individuals or organizations or churches believing in what they're doing. So it is doable. So some benefits. One, there's an awful lot more freedom in partnership development because it's not dependent on events. Like I just said with the COVID, you've got freedom to do things, to go places, to pursue the things the Lord's laying on your heart, whether that place or that opportunity is going to pay you a dime or not. So unbelievable amount of freedom to say, this is what the Lord's calling me to do, and I can go do it because I've got people that have funded me in such a way that I can move forward. So that's the huge reason. That's the obvious reason why anybody would want to even consider it. But there's also greater stability, as I already said with the COVID, that these are partners. It's not donors. That's why we don't ever use the word donors. And they are donations, but it's more than just than a check. It's about, this is an individual or a family or a church or an organization that says, we believe in what you're doing and we want to become a part of what you're doing. So there is great stability there. There's a commitment to walk together to this, to pray together, to assist each other, and to financially support one another. The third benefit of this is relationships. That again, it's not just a check. It's about building relationships. This phrase here, our president, I keep meaning to ask him where he came up with this, but he has been using this currency. Relationships are the currency of the kingdom. We have new ministry opportunities because of relationships we build and nurture. We have funding that we need because of relationships that we build and nurture. So it is about building those relationships, because we actually have some people that come to ACT because they like the structure and want to be a part of that. But they say, you know what, I don't really need to raise a whole lot of money because, I already have a full-time job or I'm retired or whatever. So there's not a great need for their own personal funding in that. And I say, well, that's great that you're in that position. But the other benefit is that you want to invite people to be a part of what you're doing and build those relationships and give them the opportunity of doing what you're doing and helping you with that. So relationships are huge. The fourth thing is this is really funding partnership development becomes an aspect of discipleship, that it's not just a means to an end. It kind of goes along with the relationships, but if you see yourself in this funding strategy as a discipler, it expands your ministry. I love this quote. There's a book that I will highly recommend. I'll mention it again at the end, called The God Ask. I would recommend every one of you, if you're even considering this, get a copy of that book. But one of my favorite quotes in the book is that we are called to be Holy Spirit-filled recruiters, committing ourselves to spend the rest of our lives inviting others to give their time, talent, and treasure to fulfill the Great Commission across the planet. If we see our efforts in partnership development as a discipleship of helping other people use their gifts, their funds, and their time for the Lord's purposes, then even if they don't partner us, we are still building the kingdom. We are still discipling others. And I have no doubt that because of that, fruit is going to be born and the Lord is going to provide every blessing and every provision that you need. So discipleship is a benefit of this, that it helps you to actually become a discipler as you are discipling these potential partners and using their gifts for the Lord's purposes. And then the last little piece that we see as a great benefit is that it actually adds to your ministry. That you're not, like I said up here, you're not raising funds just so I can go do my ministry, but partnership development actually becomes a part of your ministry. Because these partners that I'm developing, that's like my virtual congregation. I'm not just looking at them to support my ministry, but hey, how can I be praying for you? You get to know their families. You get to know what struggles they're going through, and you're praying with them and you're encouraging them. Byron Spradlin, our president and founder, he's been a partnership developer for 40 plus years. And he is doing the weddings and the funerals of some of his partners just because he's been walking with them for so long. And many of them see him as their pastor almost more than they see their own local pastor. Not necessarily encouraging that. But if you see this as, I'm not raising funds just so I can go do what I believe the Lord's calling me to do, but this becomes a part of my ministry so that I can minister to those who are partnering with me, and we are partnering together in that process. Make sense? Any comments or questions about any of this? Does that stir anything with you, or any specific questions about any of these pieces here?
I guess if the people that I'm getting donations from are like a lot older than me, I would have trouble thinking about like discipling them. So I guess it would be more of like just like an encouragement and that and standing alongside and with somebody.
Yeah, and there's obviously different phases and different types of relationship in that discipleship. So yeah, encouragement is definitely a piece. And so yeah, if there's a more mature believer, that's walking along with you, then maybe they have a bigger role of discipling you and encouraging you. But you're not seeing. It's more about a perspective. You're not just seeing them as like I said here, a means to an end, that I need you to go do my ministry. No, we are in walking in this together, and I'm ministering to you, you're ministering to me, and we're partnering. Same thing with the pastor of a church. Hopefully the pastor is not standing up on Sundays and preaching stewardship just so he can get his paycheck. He's preaching stewardship, and that church is having impact because he's inviting you to use your funds to help this church do the things this church is supposed to be doing in this community and across the world. And that's what you're doing. You're not just doing it just to get a paycheck, asking people to partner with you. You are saying, hey, look at what the Lord is doing through our music, or this gallery we're trying to do, or the different things that the Lord's calling us to do. And I can't do it by myself. Let's do it together. That's what we're trying to do, that we are in this together moving forward and growing this ministry together. So I think that's the perspective, and that's where the God ask will be greatly encouraging to you, to really help you think through the biblical perspective and some biblical foundations on helping you to become more confident, because you have to become confident in that. Melissa, your point there, I mean, there's a level of confidence in these areas that I am called to this before I'm going to be comfortable in doing it and be able to be effective in doing that. Because if I'm doubtful, if I'm hesitant, then there's no way that others, unless they just love you, aunts and uncles and grandparents, and they'll come along, and good friends, they'll support you. But to go beyond that, you've got to be confident in that this is what the Lord's calling me to do. This is a part of my ministry. And I am so excited about my ministry that I can't help but invite you to be a part of that. That's where you've really got to get to in the funding. So again, I know we wanted to talk about more things, and I am going to move to that now. But if you are considering moving into a partnership funding strategy for funding your ministry, then these are the things that you really need to kind of wrestle with and become comfortable with. And that's going to give you the ability, the confidence, effectiveness in moving forward with that. And the God Ask is a great book that kind of wrestles with this, and we treat, and I'll talk about it in a minute. We also have some other training that we're happy to invite you into. And then there's other revenue streams. We've already talked about them a little bit, but this is where these are all still nonprofit revenue streams specifically, but grants. If you have a nonprofit, you can get grants, and there are grants that are potentially out there to help you. There are some grants in the entertainment, music, kind of art world that may support you, moving forward. But there's also grants depending on what you're using your ministry for. If you're using your ministry, your art, to reach at-risk teens, there could be grants for there. Wendy, the people going through trauma. There could be the foundations and organizations that provide grants for ministries or organizations that are working with at-risk or traumatized individuals. So, but we always are fast to point out grants are possible, but grants are not the golden egg. 40 plus years of history here with ACT, we have gotten grants, but we don't get a lot of them. They're not regular. There's a ton of people out there applying. There's a lot of grants. It takes a lot of work. And I'm not saying don't pursue those, but you cannot put all your eggs in a basket hoping and believing that you're going to get a grant or two that's going to do all your funding. But that is a possibility. Churches and other organizations, that's the same thing as partnership. It's not just individuals. You could go to churches, your own church, but other churches, and potentially they will support you, other organizations. I can tell you, though, it is not a great revenue source for many of our departments. Many of our departments, their own church hasn't really supported them, because a lot of churches, denominations particularly, are kind of in their structure that you give to the church, and then the church is going to give their denomination and all of that. And so we've kind of lost within our churches sometimes that understanding, at least some denominations, of supporting the individual minister or missionary. But they're certainly worth, but they could come along and partner with you with their prayers. Maybe they could offer you free space in their church. I mean, so there could be other ways they partner with you without, potentially giving you a financial gift. So that's always worth considering. And then gifts in kind. I'm not sure if you know what this term means, but nonprofits can receive gifts in kind. It's the same thing like if you go to Goodwill and you take you do some house cleaning and spring cleaning, and you pack up all the old clothes your kids have outgrown and books and things around, and you take them to Goodwill. You are giving a gift in kind to Goodwill, and then Goodwill will give you a receipt. They don't have to put the value of the things you give them. They just list clothes and books and electronics and, kind of itemize things. And then you could turn around and use that on your taxes as a tax deductible. You figure out the value of those things and declare that. So the same way, you as a nonprofit could do that same thing. People could give you supplies, equipment, a car, so there's a lot of different things you could receive that people could give you that they would potentially get a tax deductible benefit for, and would help you move forward with your ministry efforts and strategies. And then the last one, and then we'll transition to another slide here in a minute, but obviously, again, other revenue streams. Nonprofits can sell stuff. So you can create product, you can create training manuals, CDs, whatever the case may be, and you can either sell them, so that's perfectly legitimate, but a lot of our ministries don't sell anything. They have CDs, they have DVDs, they have books, but they just give them away and just say, hey, we'd love you to support our ministry. Maybe if you make a contribution of $15, per CD or per book. So that's the benefit that a nonprofit has. That way you don't ever have to sell anything, not track sales tax or whatever. You're just giving it all away, but then people are still supporting you with a gift for the book or the CD and those kind of things. So that's an option there. So before I jump on this last one, I'm going to, we'll talk about this one a little bit more, but any questions about anything else on this page or the other revenue streams that I mentioned?
Yeah, hi Larry, it's Lou Lolio.
Yeah.
Do you have this broken down where you think that, where the real concentration is for your partners in, what would be the biggest piece of the pie?
Well, for most of our ACT ministries, the biggest piece of that pie is that yellow piece. Going back to the slide here real quick, is this. Most of our ministries are supported with this financial partnerships, $100 a month, $50 a month, $500 every quarter or whatever. Individuals coming alongside and saying, we believe in what you're doing, Lou. You need to be out there doing it. We want you to go wherever the Lord opens up, and we want to support you on a regular basis. So if you had, just think of what difference it would make if you had, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month just coming in of people supporting you on this way. One, maybe help pay you bills, but even more than that, it gives you the ability to go to places maybe that can't afford you to come, or, pursuing opportunities. That's where the majority of our ministry funding has come from. Now we do get grants, and some people do golfing tournaments and do other kind of fundraisers and things like that. So that's a big piece. And still, other than, this past year, a big part of the revenue of many of our ministries was ministry events, doing an event where they take up a love offering or charge a fee or something like that. But I would say this and this piece are the two biggest pieces that fund most of our ministries, and this is continuing to grow. It's been a great opportunity this year for us to encourage and challenge some of our ministries who have primarily been dependent on this red piece over here to kind of say, well, you can't do events, so what if we really focus on trying to build more partners? So they've kind of upped up and kind of taken some steps and some strategies to try to get out and share their message and invite others. Does that answer that? They answer help, Lou?
That's perfect. Yeah, I know you said don't necessarily look at the the
Right.
size of the pie there, but it actually is more along those lines than
It is.
not.
I mean, it is, and and each individual ministry is different. So some
Sure.
ministries it's 100% the yellow piece. Others it might be 50-50. Or have several pieces, product and events and partnership development. So it really varies from ministry to ministry depending on on what you're doing, and that's where it can be helpful to combine all of those things.
Thank you.
Now, this is one of the things, kind of what I really kind of almost like the point of the title of my workshop. Am I selling stuff or not selling stuff for my ministry? Am I for profit or am I nonprofit? So how do we potentially navigate? And it's back to one of the questions. I couldn't tell who asked the question earlier about some other questions about determining if I should be for profit or nonprofit or when I can. What does it look like if we try to combine these things that I try to do events? Let me paint a couple of examples. Like we have some of our ministries that do their ministry. Let's musicians are a good example, even though not everybody's here a musician, but it just is a good example to use. We have some of our ministers or some of our musicians that do concerts, and they have different types of venues that they do concerts. So they might have this one particular venue that they say, this is going to be part of my nonprofit. So anytime I am going to this place or doing this type of music concert or event, I'm going to pocket that money and consider that income from me as a for-profit event. Or they might have even some of our ministries have even created for-profit entities. So you can actually have a for-profit LLC, a nonprofit, and sole proprietorship, doing it as a self-employed person. You can have all three of those things running simultaneously. That is feasible. So they could say these concerts, these events, this product is all going to be part of my nonprofit. I mean, my for-profit structure. So that doesn't have anything to do with my nonprofit. But these things over here, I'm going to be in churches or doing, different kind of things. I'm going to define these as my nonprofit. So it is feasible to split up, even though it's kind of the same activity. I can define some things as for-profit and some things as nonprofit. Or it might even be far clearer than that. My for-profit is I'm going to have all of my product as for-profit and I'm going to sell it. And maybe I even, again, create a LLC for that. Or I just do every CD, every book, everything I sell, that's going to just come to my bank account and it's going to be my personal income. But all my events, I'm going to do nonprofit and, love offerings and things like that. So it's feasible to look at all of my activities, all of my ministry activities, and then decide which activities, which revenues, and which expenses are part of my nonprofit structure, and which activities, income, and expenses are part of my for-profit structure. That's what we're talking about, of how to split those things up and divide those things. So let me give you a couple of things to keep in mind as you're considering this, and there probably will be some questions here. The big major IRS no-no is you cannot use donated funds or gifts to benefit a for-profit activity. So you cannot receive a donation and then your business benefit from that, or you benefit from it unless it's income that you're being paid a salary for doing that nonprofit thing. That's okay. But you can't just take a donation and stick it in your pocket because I need need to buy groceries this year. That's got to be considered salary and stuff like that. That's the big thing that'll get IRS, that the IRS will get onto you. That's the question, a couple of, well, it's been a couple of years ago now, or maybe I forgot when it was, but there was the big thing in the news about this pastor that bought him a jet so he could go around and do ministry. Was that a nonprofit? Was that a legitimate ability to use nonprofit funds? Well, maybe it is. If he needs to use that jet to get to all the ministry opportunities that the Lord's opening up to, then yeah, sure, that's a ministry event and a ministry expense, and I can use my donated funds for that. But if it was determined that he was also doing business, selling books that he's not running through his nonprofit, or, speaking engagements that's not his nonprofit, or going on vacations that's not as part of, and those kind of things, and he's using donated funds for that, then that's where you get in trouble. So that's the big piece that we've got to keep in mind as we're trying to figure out how do we navigate this. Wendy, you're talking about doing a studio, and galleries and showing galleries. You could charge tickets, for that. Well, you could charge tickets and do that as a for-profit, but then maybe you have nonprofit events that there is no, so that way you're still the same gallery, but sometimes it's a for-profit, sometimes it's a nonprofit. Or
Can I
you
ask
could,
a question?
yeah, go ahead.
So back to your example of like gifts in kind, if somebody gave you a car for your nonprofit, you would only be able to use that card going to nonprofit activities. You can use it to go to the movies, or like buy groceries, or things
Yeah,
that have
well,
nothing to do with your nonprofit.
potentially, that's where, and we'll talk about some other things, that's where you've got to figure those kind of things out, and it's got to be clear there. So someone could give you the vehicle, and so it's basically like a company car, but then when you're using, or a ministry car, so that, so you're paying for all expenses, the cars, gas and everything, you're using donated funds for that. And then you would just keep a chart, a record of every time you use that to go buy groceries or go use it for personal use. And then you would potentially probably owe taxes because you are now personally using a ministry car. So that's almost like getting compensated for the use of that vehicle. So there are ways, and there's a lot of ways of navigating these pieces. But you've got to be aware of these things you've got to be navigating. Does that make sense? That's what we're trying to look at, what you've got to keep in mind. And I'll get into that, here as we look at this. So, and I've already kind of talked about these, but there's really 2 C's that are crucial when you are trying to figure out combining this nonprofit and for-profit piece. The first C is that it has to be clear. Like I was saying before, it has to be clear what is the difference between your nonprofit activities, revenues, and expenses, and it's clear what are your for-profit activities, income, and expenses. Because if you got audited, let's say you personally got audited, and this auditor is looking at your books and he sees, well, sometimes this money goes over here into your bank account, and sometimes this money is go over here into this nonprofit. What's the difference? Well, you've got to be able to clearly define why it's going into your bank account. These events, these activities, it's going to my bank account as personal income, but these activities are going over into this nonprofit. So that's got to be clear. So that's the first thing. Then the second C is it's got to be consistent. So you can't sometimes say, well, I got money for this event and I need to buy some groceries this month, so I'm going to put it into my bank account. But then next time I do the same event, and you know what, I'm okay with groceries but I need more money over here to buy some new equipment for my nonprofit, so I'll put over here. That inconsistency, when it's not clear and it kind of just seems to, there's no clear consistency and definition, that's where you're going to get in trouble. Now, these can change. So that's the good thing. So you can start off by saying, hey, this activity is nonprofit, and so I'm going to run it as nonprofit. But maybe down the road, things change and it evolves and it grows and stuff like that. and you start saying, well, aspects of this actually would be better in a for-profit structure, well, you can make that change. There's some steps you have to do to make sure it's all looks clear and it doesn't look like you've raised this money and now all of a sudden you're moving over here to the for-profit. So you have to, but you can evolve and change and grow. You're not locking yourself into something, but you always have to go through each stages of that, make it clear and consistent.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Um, when I sell a piece of art
Yep.
through the gallery, a
Uh-huh.
portion of that is going to support the gallery.
Okay.
So am I mixing things wrong? Because if it's for profit, for the sale is for profit, but a portion of that is going to the gallery as a donation. So
Yeah.
am I not mixing that right, or should I do that
Sure. No,
differently?
no, that makes sense. Now, the first thing you got to keep in mind, and sometimes, especially some of our independent musicians, kind of get this. It takes them a little while to get this because they've just done everything as nonprofit. I mean, as a for-profit kind of sole proprietorship. The main thing the IRS wants to know is who's getting the money. Because if an individual or a for-profit business is getting the money, then they get a percentage of that, from taxes. If a nonprofit is getting it, receiving the money, then the IRS doesn't get any percentage of that. So in your case, so you talk about selling. Are you selling tickets, or there's a fee to get into your gallery?
No, it's just an open gallery. People can come in, take a look around. If they like something, they can purchase it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
a portion of that goes to the gallery.
Okay, so when it's purchased, so there is a purchase there. So the first question is, who's getting that money? Is that money going to you or a business? And it sounds like that is the case. So that money is going to you. So you or the business has got to declare that 100% as income for tax liability. So but then that business, whether it's a LLC, official corporate, or you as an individual, are then making a donation of a percentage of that to the nonprofit. So that's the business has the money or you have the money, and then you are making a contribution to the ministry. So that's actually a tax deductible benefit to the business or to you, because you are now taking your own personal money and making a contribution of a certain percentage over here to the ministry. Does that make sense? Or to the
Yes,
nonprofit? Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
And that goes for all of the artists in the gallery.
that's
That
correct. Yeah,
So
yeah.
no
So
matter
they're going to have
who
to
it is.
declare 100% of whatever they sell their painting for as personal income or business income. But then they've made an agreement with you that just to support the ministry, some percentage of that is going to be a donation from them to the ministry. So that's how you're keeping those separated. Yeah.
In the paperwork, when the sale is made, say they've agreed, say 5% or 10, whatever their percentage is of the sale goes to the gallery. Am I to show that on the sale, or just on the bookkeeping that I do to show the IRS?
And there's a number of ways that can be done. So that's more follow up. I can help you with that.
Okay.
But yeah, you've got the right idea. I mean, in some way, you've got to record 100% of the sale. That's taxable income. Some percentage of that is going over as a contribution to here. So they're getting a deduction, a tax deductible receipt for that. So so in some of these things, especially when you are dividing things up like this, you really need to begin thinking of yourself as two separate entities, or maybe even three. If you've got a for-profit LLC, you're doing some things as sole proprietor, self-employed, and you got a nonprofit, there's really three entities there. So then you just got to start thinking, well, how do these entities interact and do business with one another? Same thing if your nonprofit wanted to go buy some supplies from Walmart. That's a for-profit, nonprofit doing business with a for-profit. Well, the same thing with you. If you have some aspects of your ministry that are for-profit, then you need to, and you want to do something or work together with your nonprofit, you just have to figure out the proper way of you doing business or supporting one another. The nonprofit doing business with the for-profit, or the for-profit supporting the nonprofit. That's kind of how you're figuring those things out.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where I was saying right here, ownership and use of shared equipment, and who owns these things. So let's say Lou's out doing his music ministry. He needs a new sound equipment for his ministry. He's doing part of his ministry as a for-profit business, but he's doing part of his ministry as a nonprofit organization. Well, who buys the equipment? If you use donated funds to go buy that equipment, then that equipment belongs to the nonprofit.
Right.
And so can the for-profit use it? Well, it can, but you would have to create some kind of rental agreement, so the for-profit can rent the equipment for $25 a gig or whatever is reasonable, kind of a fair market value of those kind of things, because otherwise, if the nonprofit just let the for-profit, then that's using donated funds to benefit a for-profit activity. Especially, a nonprofit could just loan their equipment to a local, business just out of the goodness of their heart. But when you are the nonprofit and the for-profit, you have to be extra careful about that, because then that looks like you're raising funds to benefit. Same kind of thing. If you're doing a concert and you're doing that as a for-profit, you're pocketing all the money for that concert, whatever they've paid you to do, and you've got donated funds. Well, you can't use these donated funds to pay for travel to that concert, because then you're using donated funds to benefit you getting to a for-profit activity. If you're buying, so those kind of things. So that's where it's okay for a nonprofit to purchase equipment and let the for-profit to use it, but you're going to have to rent it, so there's agreement. If the for-profit purchases it, the for-profit can help nonprofits all day long. So you can let the nonprofit use it, no problem at all, because it's okay to go from a for-profit helping a nonprofit. It's just the nonprofit can't use donated funds to benefit the for-profit. Make sense? Questions?
Yeah, I think I did things backwards. Because when for the art side and the gift shop of the art thing, artists can donate whatever piece that they want, like put on a t-shirt or a tote bag or a mug, whatever like that. I bought the equipment to do those things with the nonprofit money because it's going to be used in the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
But if the artist says, yeah, you can use my art, but I want 10% of the t-shirt sale, whatever, I'm not sure I can do that. So
yeah, again, that's just where it has to be. I'm not saying you cannot do that. It just needs to be clearly defined and make sure that's in line with, that supporting the ministry, and those ministry funds are not being used to benefit your business. So there are ways of figuring those things out. So there's no, that's what I always try to say when I do this kind of a workshop. I'm not trying to limit what you're doing. I'm just saying these are things you've got to be aware of and navigate. But there's always a way to legally and rightly figure out the way of benefiting a for-profit and benefiting the nonprofit. Because if they're both, you want both of them to benefit if you are splitting them, because they're going to mutually help each other grow. You don't want the for-profit to be struggling, and the nonprofit, so how do you navigate these things to come together?
right. And I want the artists who are donating their time and expertise to create things to be compensated in some kind of way as well. So I'm just wondering, should I develop the for-profit and then buy back that equipment so that the nonprofit can use it anytime they want?
Yeah. Or again, just start charging, if the nonprofit paid for it, just start charging a rental fee to the for-profit to use it, or,
Okay.
some kind of, so same thing. If you didn't have that equipment, but you had to go rent that equipment for somebody else, you would just rent it, from a business. So your nonprofit can rent it there.
Okay.
So these are the kind of things. I mean, it can get complicated, but they can be worked through. You just have to kind of clearly define those kind of things. So, so did I raise any other questions? Did I answer the question earlier? I couldn't tell who asked that, about ways of, some other questions or other things to help you define when I need a nonprofit or when I need a for-profit or how they work together. Anything else that kind of comes to mind here that
I
I
have
can
one more
address?
question. I'm sorry to butt in so often,
Go
but
right
I do
ahead.
have a question. When you were talking about in-kind gifts,
Uh-huh.
that it would be great, and I have no problem asking if anybody wants to donate a building to be the gallery when we get up there. Is I don't, should that be done through the nonprofit side?
Well, when you start talking about big capital items like that, that's a whole new ball game. So the short answer is yes, people, you can donate a building to a nonprofit, but there's a lot of other factors going into that and there's a lot of other options
Okay.
there. So yes, that could happen, but that's something you would want to get further counsel on and decide the best way to move forward with those larger capital items.
Okay.
Someone wants to donate a bus because you're transporting students. Well, that's pretty clear. So yeah, the ministry could own a bus, but like Melissa was asking, if someone wants to donate a car, is it better for them to donate the car to the ministry? Or like in our situation with ACT, we don't want ACT to own a whole bunch of cars. So if someone comes along, because Melissa is a department of ACT, she is a ministry of ACT. So if someone wanted to donate a car to Melissa, they could donate it to ACT so we could give tax deductible benefit to that donor. But then ACT would turn around and sign the lease, the title over to Melissa, so that now that car is Melissa's car, but we would have to report the value of that to the IRS. So we basically just kind of paid Melissa with a car, so whatever the value of that, you owe taxes on that, but still the taxes are going to be far less than you going out and buying a car. And now that car is yours to use. So there's a lot of ways of navigating and figuring that out. Just those are the kind of things you're going to have to figure out within your own nonprofit, how you're going to do that and navigate that. So other questions, anything else?
Yeah, Larry, it's Lou. I had a question. Now, I had this on my question list before we started, so we're getting into this now.
Yeah.
As far as Artists in Christian Testimony International, when we're part of that, once we become part of that, and we're in nonprofit status, are we incorporating ACT into our promotions and our products, as far as, because that's where the money is eventually going to go?
Okay. Yeah. Let me. That's a great question. I'm happy to get into the specifics of ACT,
Okay.
but only you and Melissa are specifically with ACT, so I don't want to spend too much time unless the others here want to know some of that too. So let me address other more general questions about nonprofit, and then we can get more specifically into ACT for anybody that has specific questions there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good.
I can chime in on the more general questions. I wondered, there's so many specific scenarios that you're talking about. I'm wondering who the experts are that partner with artists to develop a nonprofit or a profit and sole proprietorship and nonprofit. Even after listening for an hour, I'm like, wow, I really can't do this. So,
sure.
Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, well, one, if you need help, creating a nonprofit, then you probably need a lawyer, and we actually have a very good lawyer that assists us. That is an expert in Christian. He is a Christian and he's an expert in nonprofits. So I could happy follow up with me. He could give you his name to do that. As far as counsel and direction, we're happy to do it. I'll go ahead and jump to this next slide here. Ways ACT International could potentially assist you, and then I'll finish answering your question. One is, I already mentioned this before, we do training. And one particular training you might be interested in is what we call the Partnership Development Team, or Partnership Development Training. It's an 8-week online course. We use Zoom, so you're meeting with a group of 5 or 6 other, typically ACT, but we open it up to anybody. You don't have to be a part of ACT, where we talk about how do you effectively communicate your vision to others and invite them, creating a little presentation so you're effectively communicating and inviting people to partner. So that happens every January, May, and September. So we got another one coming up in January. So you've got my contact information. Feel free to follow up if you'd like more information and potentially participate in that. The second thing is kind of what I was saying is, or mentioning to Lou, is that, I mean, this is what we do. So both, you guys you could bring your studio. You already have a nonprofit structure, so you didn't. But if you didn't already have a nonprofit structure, you become a part of ACT. Your department becomes a part of ACT, and then you run it. You're still the director of your department, so you could still do the gallery exactly what you're doing. You're just now doing it as a part of ACT. ACT handles all your bookkeeping for you. You have immediate 501c3 status, so you don't have to go create your own 501c3. And then we do all the coaching and helping and support and that kind of thing with you. All of our departments help support our overall ministry by 11% of their total revenue goes to ACT. I will say, Wendy, if this is at all interested to you, we have had people who already have their own nonprofit who have almost kind of like made their nonprofit status dormant in a sense, just report no activity, and kind of come under the wing of ACT for a while and function as the partner of ACT, and then maybe eventually go back to their own nonprofit, or maybe they just get so at home they stay with us and drop their nonprofit. So happy to discuss, that if that's at all of interest to you there. So ACT could potentially be a way of becoming a part of AC to help you move forward. And then the last thing, back to you, I've been doing this for 16 years with ACT and all, and I'm happy to help you answer some more specifics. I mean, I was just scratching the surface, and like you said, probably raised more questions that I answered, but at least some of the questions you need answers to. I am more than happy, whether you're with ACT or not, to provide any kind of further counsel, direction, answer questions, help you move forward in those ways.
I appreciate it.
So does
Thank you.
that answer your question, give you some direction on maybe some next steps there?
Yes.
Yeah.